July 1943, Germany possessed what many believed was an impenetrable shield, a sophisticated network of radar stations, searchlights, and night fighters stretching from Denmark to Switzerland. The Kammhuber line had claimed thousands of Allied airmen. German controllers could guide interceptors within striking distance of any bomber crossing into Reich airspace. But on the night of July 24th, something impossible happened. 791 British bombers flew toward Hamburg, and the entire German radar network went blind. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply useless. This is the story of how a few pounds of aluminum strips changed the course of the air war forever. The confidence. By mid-1943, Germany's air defense system represented the cutting edge of military technology. The Kammhuber line consisted of radar stations with overlapping coverage, layered 3 deep from Denmark to the middle of France, each covering a zone about 32 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide. Each control center was known as a Himmelbett zone, consisting of a Freya radar with a range of about 100 kilometers and 2 Würzburg radars for precise tracking. One Würzburg locked onto the intruding bomber. The other tracked the German night fighter. Ground controllers could then guide the Messerschmitt Bf-110 or Junkers Ju-88 to within visual range of their target. The system worked with methodical precision. When British bombers entered German airspace, radar operators detected them immediately. Searchlights illuminated the aircraft. Night fighters moved in for the kill. By early 1943, loss rates for RAF bombers exceeded 4 to 5% per major raid, levels deemed unsustainable for prolonged campaigns. The Germans had every reason to believe their night skies were secure, but RAF Bomber Command had been studying a weakness. Each Himmelbett zone could handle only 1 interception at a time. The answer wasn't to avoid the boxes, it was to blind them entirely. The British gamble. The solution came from an unlikely source. A British scientist named Joan Curran. She invented window, a tactic now known as radar chaff, paper strips coated in aluminum that created false signals on German radar screens. The principle was elegant. When a radar-generated radio wave hit those shiny strips, it reflected their energy back to the radar screen, fooling operators into targeting what was actually dead air. Window consisted of aluminum strips 10.5 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide, attached to one side of coarse black paper. But there was a problem. British command had held window back for over a year, fearing Germany would adopt the same technique against British cities. By July 1943, the calculus changed. Bomber losses were mounting. Something had to give. On the night of July 24, 1943, 791 bombers took off for Hamburg. Crews were issued strange bundles of foil-coated paper strips. A crew member crouched over a flare chute deep in the fuselage and hand-dispensed 1 bundle per minute until the bomber was out of Würzburg range. What happened next was unprecedented: the collapse. As the bombers crossed into German airspace, they began dropping window. Millions of aluminum strips tumbled through the night sky. On the ground, German radar operators watched their screens transform into chaos. The German radar operators saw what appeared to be a stream entering their box, each packet of chaff appearing to be a bomber on their display. Where there had been distinct targets, there was now only a blizzard of electronic noise. Night fighters were sent to intercept the phantom streams. They found empty sky. Meanwhile, the real bomber force appeared hundreds of miles away, too far to respond. Britain lost only 12 aircraft in this raid, thanks to window. The success rate was staggering compared to previous operations. The evening of July 24th saw British aircraft drop 2,300 tons of incendiary bombs on Hamburg in just a few hours, the explosive power equivalent to what German bombers had dropped on London in their 5 most destructive raids. The fires burned for 3 days, but the nightmare had only begun. The weather conditions were setting up for something far worse. The firestorm. 3 days later, on July 27th, conditions were perfect for catastrophe. The unusually dry and warm weather meant everything was very dry. and Hamburg had experienced a long, sultry summer. Shortly before midnight, 787 RAF aircraft attacked Hamburg, with 722 aircraft making it to the target and dropping 1,174 tons of incendiaries. The bombs fell in an unprecedented concentration on the working-class districts of Hammerbrook, Borgfelde, and Rothenburg-Sort, areas of narrow streets and timber-framed apartment buildings. Within minutes, thousands of individual fires merged into something entirely new. The tornadic fire created a huge inferno, with winds of up to 240 kilometers per hour, reaching temperatures of 800 degrees Celsius and altitudes exceeding 300 meters. The physics were brutal. As superheated air rose rapidly, it created a vacuum at street level. The oxygen was literally sucked out of basements and air raid shelters and replaced with carbon monoxide and smoke, suffocating inhabitants. Asphalt streets appeared to burst into flame, and the firestorm incinerated more than 21 square kilometers of the city. For those caught in the open, survival was nearly impossible. Winds reached speeds of 170 miles per hour, and street temperatures rose to at least 1,400 degrees, enough to melt glass and asphalt. The death toll from that single night would eventually reach into the tens of thousands. The panic in Berlin. When news of Hamburg reached Berlin, the reaction was one of existential dread. Albert Speer, Germany's Minister of Armaments, understood immediately what this meant. According to Albert Speer, the firebombing of Hamburg made an extraordinary impression on Hitler's closest advisors. Speer told interrogators that if the Allies would repeat this success on 4 or 5 other German towns, then Germany would collapse. Hamburg wasn't just a city destroyed. It was proof that no German city was safe. The huge amount of damage to Hamburg precipitated a number of large changes to German air defense systems. Priority was given to fighter production, and research was intensified for more effective radar technology. The ripple effects were immediate and devastating. By August 1943, 45% of all German fighters were now located on the home front, and heavy anti-aircraft guns in Germany were increased by over 25%. These were resources desperately needed on the Eastern Front against Soviet forces. Meanwhile, the Kammhuber line, once the pride of German engineering, was suddenly obsolete. Major Hajo Hermann proposed a radical solution known as wilde Sau, or wild boar tactics, where single-engine day fighters would be sent into the night sky without radar guidance, using the light from burning cities below to silhouette bombers. What really changed? Operation Gomorrah continued with additional raids through August 2nd. The death toll reached approximately 37,000 civilians, with 180,000 wounded, and 60% of Hamburg's housing destroyed. 1 million people fled the city. The strategic impact went far beyond Hamburg's ruins. Germany's window of radar dominance closed as quickly as it had opened. Luftwaffe technicians analyzed the captured window strips and developed countermeasures, new radar frequencies, and techniques to distinguish between chaff and aircraft. But the damage was done. The defensive posture had shifted permanently. The Allies had discovered that even the most sophisticated defense system could be defeated not through overwhelming force, but through deception and exploitation of technical vulnerabilities. The brief period when window rendered German radar useless had forced a fundamental reorganization of German air defense that would strain resources for the remainder of the war. Conclusion: Operation Gomorrah did not end World War II. The conflict would grind on for nearly 2 more years, but it marked a turning point in how wars could be fought. For the first time, a major military power's integrated defense network had been rendered ineffective not by destroying it, but by overwhelming its ability to process information. The principle established at Hamburg, that technological systems have cognitive limits that can be exploited, would echo through every subsequent conflict. The ruins of Hamburg stood as a testament to a brutal truth. In modern warfare, the most devastating weapon isn't always the most powerful. Sometimes it's the one that makes your enemy blind. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we're reminded that military superiority isn't permanent. Systems fail. Certainty evaporates. And the night sky, once thought secure, can become hostile territory in the span of a single evening. If this deep dive into one of history's most significant air operations resonated with you, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this with anyone fascinated by military history. And don't forget to subscribe for more documentaries that examine the turning points that shaped our world. Until next time, remember, history's greatest lessons often come from its darkest nights. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.